fellow tent pros. Welcome to the Pitchin Tents podcast with your host, Bryan Bolt.
And Davis West. We got a good one today, Bryan.
We do. We have a topic a lot of people are going to be looking, asking for and looking forward to. And we have an esteemed guest with us, none other
than good old
Keith Eismann.
That's right. Keder Keith, baby.
We're here. Thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you, Keith. We're looking forward to getting into all things Keder on today's episode. Been busy spring for a lot of people. Keder tents flying around all over the place. So we want to get into why Keder and everything about it. Keith, let's start. Why don't you tell us a little bit about Keith Eismann and your background, who you are, what's your story?
Absolutely. So I started putting up tents when I was 15 years old. In high school, my mom used to drive me to a company called Carl's Event Rental. That's based in Milwaukee. Was based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. So I've been putting up tents for a long time. I'm too old to do it now. So now I'm the Keder guy. Anyways, started working back in 1988, installing tents. But those tents were just rope and pole and frame tents. They weren't Keder tents back then. So I didn't start really installing Keder tents until we bought our first Keder tent back in 2003. Never did a Keder tent before in our lives. Didn't know where else we'd rent it. And before you knew it, we were doing Keder tents nonstop. So the first Keder tent that we bought was 2003, and stayed doing that until around 2009 when we decided to sell that business. And we were, way back then, I got into making Keder because way back then at Carl's, we were making our own tops. And the supplier that we were using, although they were great, they couldn't keep up with the demand of the amount of Keder that we needed. And so the lead times were just becoming too long. So at that point, my business partner, I just said, hey, we need to figure out how to make Keder. So we were making Keder for ourselves back in the day. And then just based on need, once we sold that business, we decided, hey, we think there's a need for a good supplier with great service. And so we started Keder Solutions in 2000. So that's a little bit of my background, why I started Keder. It's really Keder Solutions. It really was just based on, we saw a need for good service and a quality product.
Right. So like I said, Keder kind of changed the game in our industry, didn't it?
It certainly did. I realized how big, I'm not saying volume, not the business itself, but just Keder is used in so many different things. For this podcast, all of us just predominantly think about tents, but you look at semi-trucks going down the road, you look at awnings on houses, you look at signs and banners. It's used everywhere. It's just such a great, sleek product that, replaced a lot of things like grommets. You go into Home Depots and instead of the sign company, when they're replacing their banners, their for sale banners, and trying to hang a banner straight with grommets, now they're going in and just sliding out the old banner, then replacing the new banner because it's got Keder, and they're done in half the amount of time.
Right. So I want to jump into this. Bryan, you're going to be able to touch on this. Keder Keith, you know all about this, but I want to talk about why Keder. In our day and age, it's predominantly the most used system in our industry now. I mean, it started from West Coast. It's graduated into Keder. Talked to a guy today on the phone who's had West Coast his whole life, and he's like, I think it's about time for me to bite the bullet and get into Keder. He said, I'm seeing all these tents up everywhere. It seems like the guys are putting it up quicker. It seems like they like dealing with it more. So let's just touch on why Keder. I mean, starting off, it's just in terms of a better ROI. Bryan, jump in on why it's a better ROI in our industry now.
Let's talk a little bit about, for those, we always mention that we sometimes we start in the middle, and I want to make sure we don't do that here. So for those people who they hear us throw the term Keder about, they may not even know what it is, right? So Keith, why don't you just give us the most elementary explanation of what Keder technically is, and then I think that could then take us into why it's a better way.
Yeah. So Keder's PVC core. It's a flexible PVC, and then that PVC core is wrapped in a polyester. It's a custom fabric. It's polyester woven on one side and PVC vinyl on the other. Why two different materials? The reason for that is the polyester woven side is what allows the Keder to slide through a track with much less friction than if it was PVC vinyl. If it was PVC vinyl, it would create a bunch of friction that would be a challenge to slide in and out of a track or in and out of a tent. The inside of it is PVC, and it's PVC so that you can weld the Keder to your tops, to banners, whatever that might be. But you wouldn't be able to weld the polyester woven side, so that's why it's on the outside.
Yeah, so Bryan, why don't you jump into why it's a better ROI?
Well, the ROI on Keder has so much to do about labor, right? And so a lot of times when we're talking to customers that have a West Coast frame, they can't see past the capital outlay and what it's going to cost them to get into that system. They can't see past that sometimes to see what their labor looks like long term. And as I tell a lot of customers who are really I'm just say stuck in that West Coast frame world, what I try to make sure that they understand is what that looks like long term to them. Not only is there less wear and tear on the tents, but it's a faster install. It's so much quicker to put that Kedered frame together because they work independently. You know, you get into a 30 or 40 wide West Coast style frame, and you're navigating trying to get those tops attached on top of a frame, wrestle that assembled top over the frame, either that or, you know, there's safety concerns too when people are trying to lace tents together on ladders. We're talking about doing Keder without even getting on the ladders to put these tops into place, right? So you can do it with less people, faster. And as I tell people a lot of times, you know, you're dealing with a West Coast frame that's going to cost you more every time you touch it versus a Kedered frame tent that's giving you maximum return every time you install it.
Right. And I mean, when you talk about, they work independently, that also allows you some install tactics that can speed up your install as well. Whereas with a West Coast style framework, you have to have that entire frame built before you can start to install any kind of tops or drag any kind of tops onto that frame. Whereas with a Keder system, you can literally start a crew working down the length of the tent, building that frame. And as they build a frame or a mid in completion and move on to the next one, you can have another 2 guys going right behind you, pulling those mids in as the frame's still being erected.
And that's got a lot to do specifically with how our tent, our Future Track, Future Light products work specifically. That's a luxury, right? And then that's how you really speed up the timestamp for how quickly these frames go together and get completed.
That's right.
But I think another advantage, guys, is just when you talk about how the Keder tops get installed. There's a lot of sites where it needs to be over a fountain or you're not building a frame tent on the ground over a fountain and then pull the top over. With a Keder top, your frame's already standing and it allows you to go over the tops of things much, much easier. Not to mention, in my opinion, in tighter locations. You got a building on both sides of you. It's harder standing up a California style frame one side at a time. So you can also be working in tighter locations.
100%. Also want to talk about, you mentioned the word tighter in terms of where it can fit. Also, tighter can be applied to the look of the tent afterwards too, because Kedered style tents and tops, you can get a whole lot tighter than you can just an old West Coast style frame.
I agree.
Yeah, not to mention they're also cleaner. They're kept cleaner, and there's less abrasion opportunities because the way the tops slide into the framework, there's more minimal frame contact as opposed to how these tops get drug over crown clusters, etc. when you're trying to get an entire assembled conventional frame tent top over the framework.
100%. And even, this is a minute detail, but even the use of ground covers, you do not have to have a huge ground cover when it comes to putting Keder tops in or taking them out, because you're simply pulling them from a single location straight up over and over. And then when it's coming out, it comes straight back out, straight down to the ground in an accordion fold.
Yeah. So like if let's say you've got a 30 by 50 frame tent, just throwing out a number. Let's say you got a 30 by 50 frame tent. You got to have a ground cover essentially that's more than 50 feet long by, you need a ground cover essentially almost as big as the top is, relatively, or certainly as long as the tent is. But when we're talking about doing these tops in independent sections, then you got a ground cover that's uh, 8 to 10 feet by 15 to 20. This is like a 10 by 20, let's call it, ground cover, only covering the portion of the ground where that independent top is going in. Then you move the ground cover down to the next one, and you can travel a lot lighter that way.
And speaking of ground covers, Bryan, a lot of times these tops are manufactured and they're bagged. At least not everyone does that, but you don't need an independent ground cover because usually the top is your ground. The bag that's on the top, a lot of guys use as the ground cover. So you're not hauling these independent tarps, as I'll call them. You're literally using the diaper, I used to call them, and that's laying on the ground protecting the span, the Keder top.
Yep.
Another thing to point on when it comes to Keder too, and in my day, I put, and Keith has too, and Bryan has too, we've all touched a bunch of Keder tents. But in terms of the ability to go longer lengths with Keder, simply by adding mids to the frame, is something that I feel like is overlooked in our industry, because then when you look at the cost of it, the cost to add a mid into a frame to make it longer is going to be substantially lower than the cost to have an additional top for an entire frame over and over and over again.
Yeah, you certainly have a lot of plug and play capability with and we're going to get into specifically kind of our products here in a minute too, but those are easily customizable because you're taking a piece of material, and to Keith's point earlier, you're simply taking that Keder and welding it to the edge of the material, and that's a lot less expensive than all the sewing and other operations that have to happen for a more conventional top. Much easier for us to build those mids. As we say, mids are just rectangles, right? They don't look like a rectangle when they're done, but you lay them flat. That's why so many tents, gable tents have become so much more popular over time for that reason.
100%. And we talked about the strength of the Keder tents. Keith, I want you to just touch on real quickly the strength of Keder when it's bonded to vinyl.
Sure. Yeah. So at the end of the day, the bond is such that PVC from the Keder is welded onto the top, and some people hot air weld that. Predominantly people are RF welding. And so then Keder, you can't do single flap, which is just one flap from the Keder that's welded onto the top. But again, probably 95% of our customers do the double flap. And so that's allowing two flaps from the Keder to be welded at the top. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but what'll happen when you talk about tear strength, what'll happen is actually the vinyl will fail before the Keder would tear. So the Keder is so strong that that's not going to be your tear point. It'll be the vinyl that would tear.
So Bryan, that kind of segues us into our use of Keder independently in our frame system. Keith has been a longtime partner with us, providing us Keder for a while, and it's nothing but great things to say about his product in Keder Solutions. And I would love to know how many yards or feet of Keder you have supplied us with, Keith. And even over the years, how much you've got out there is crazy. But Bryan, let's talk about our use of Keder and our Future Track and our Future Light series, our Future series, and how we stand different in our use of our Keder.
Yeah, first thing I want to mention is that even though the Future Track, Future Light are two different independent frame systems, loosely married together based off a 2-inch West Coast design originally, the tops themselves, or the Keder tops themselves, are interchangeable between the two systems. So we will say Future Track and Future Light in reference to the framework, but to us, they're just future tops, right? And that's how we refer to them at Top Tech. They're all future tops because they can be used interchangeably between the two systems. So one thing I would like to touch on too while we're at it is the conversation. We hear the term fully bonded Keder thrown around. That's something that Top Tech has used exclusively for as long as I can remember, and Keith can kind of weigh in on that too, as far as what Top Tech's been buying as fully bonded Keder. I think there's a little bit of a misnomer about that it's some new technology. Fully bonded Keder's been around a long, long time, and Top Tech has been using that exclusively for. I mean, July's 21 years for me. I don't remember a time that we weren't using a fully bonded Keder. Go ahead, Keith. Why don't you further explain to the listeners what it means for? I know what it is, but I would like to hear from you what it means that Keder is fully bonded.
Sure, absolutely, and you're correct, Bryan. You guys are one of the first ones in the country to do fully bonded Keder. So Keder's made two ways: fully bonded and non-fully bonded, and both are good. And in some instances, some people choose not to have fully bonded, but in the tent world, one of the greatest failures you'll see with the Keder is the Keder cord becoming exposed. And how that happens is from the frame itself or from maybe someone using a razor knife accidentally. But if you have a burr in your frame, for example, and the Keder's not fully bonded, what'll happen is it'll tear the polyester woven fabric that's wrapped around the core. And then what happens over time is that gets bigger and bigger, and the core itself, the inside core, the PVC core, will then become exposed. And then you're in trouble because then you're replacing it. However, when you have fully bonded Keder, you literally can take a razor knife to any part of the PVC cord, and you won't even see that a razor knife went to it because Keder that's not fully bonded is just bonded on the edge, or it meets the core and where the weld is on Keder. When it's fully bonded, it is bonded to the cord all the way around, and therefore, no matter if the polyester woven fabric gets cut, you don't even see the cut because it's fully bonded all the way around the core.
Yep. So that PVC wrapping, not the the polyester wrapping, excuse me, around the outside is adhered to that core. So when it's compromised, you're not seeing those two pieces come apart at all. Now, I want to make sure the listeners also understand that that's a natural wear item on a Keder tent, and those are the things that when you talk about maintenance on a Keder tent, you got to understand that there's certain things that you have to maintain, not just on the tops, but to your point a minute ago about the burr on the material on the rafter. A lot of times, or it could be a leg for a sidewall, it could be the variables are endless, but those are the kind of things that the operator and the installer needs to know to maintain, because as the Keder slides through that track, if that track has a ding in it, it's going to wear at the point where the round portion of the Keder meets the flat. And once that starts to get cut, those are the places that you're going to have to potentially do some repair. Our customers, many of our larger customers, also understand that that's up to those are skills that they have, capabilities that they have, and a lot of our customers have taken to repairing their own Keder because those are things that they can do in house.
And there is different millimeter sizes of Keder too, right, Keith?
That's correct. That's correct. It all depends on the application or the size rail or extrusion that the Keder is going through. And so, yeah, we've made Keder that's all as small as 2 millimeters in diameter, which is smaller than the tip of a pencil. And we make stuff all the way up there. There are many different sizes, and because we make it all in house, we can change size whenever someone wants. We have people that get very custom sizes, but because of our capabilities and making it all in our factory, we can change sizes and configuration. I mean, we have literally hundreds of SKUs when it comes to Keder.
Wow.
So back when I first started, Top Tech was 13 millimeter across the board on tops and sidewalls, and that will fit into a future track. Our extrusions haven't changed. That will fit into the track, but our customers were finding that it was just a little tough to pull through the tops because of the tops through the frame, because the transition that the panel makes from the rafter into the cluster and then back down the other side. So we elected, again, this is 18 to 20 years ago I'm talking about, we elected to go to an 11 millimeter Keder, which I think for the size extrusion we have is pretty common for the other manufacturers. Is probably, I would imagine, most of what you see, Keith, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong, but I think most of what you'd see in the is probably 11 or 13 is for traditionally what you're going to see in tent style frameworks.
Yeah, 11 and 13 millimeter certainly are the most popular. And to your point, when it slides a little tight, there's a misconception that people feel they need to fill the entire extrusion, we'll say, with the cord. And that's just not accurate. What you can't do is have it pull out of the mouth of the track, I'll call it, but you do not need it. In other words, a 13 millimeter is not a stronger Keder than 11 millimeter. It's all about the Keder not being able to pull out of the opening of the extrusion truss.
I think that's an important point you just made right there, that just because it's technically a larger millimeter doesn't exactly mean that it's stronger.
That is absolute fact.
We just had a custom job that came through, and the extrusions on that particular job, the customer already owned, and that extrusion is larger than what we're used to. So we had to step up to a 13 millimeter because I was truly worried that 11 was, with the size of the opening of the extrusion, I was worried that 11 under real load could potentially pull out, and you never want that. So we elected to go to 13 on that one, and the reports were that, it's in the field now, that worked great. A lot of our internal people didn't even know that there were different Keder sizes because we've been exclusively 11 millimeter for so long.
Sure, absolutely.
So, Bolt, let's jump into our frame system like you were, and the different configurations that Keder allows you to do, and the different customizable options that Keder allows you to get into once you get into a system like this.
Sure. So I'll give you a little bit of background and history. Bear with me, Keith. So way back when Top Tech started building, this is in 1996, we started building our future product, Future Light, Future Track, under license from Spencer Etzel, who originally designed that frame out west, and started selling that system under license from him. But that whole system that so many people are familiar with now, we've sold a lot of it over the years, is originally built as a conversion or an option to a West Coast frame. So if you look at the core basic elements of our future series, it's based on a 2-inch diameter, 1/8-inch wall West Coast frame with the addition of Keder. So then that was the Future Light, which is a round profile, but then we also offer it in a Future Track, and without getting into the guts, which is hard to explain just talking, that's a 2x5 nominally. So it's almost 2 tubes versus a single tube version, much stronger, heavier, can span greater distances. The Future Track is offered from 20 wide through 50 wide. We have built some smaller than 20, but it's a bit overkill. And we offer those in both hip and gable configurations. And then there's also the Future Light that we offer in 10 through 30 wide configurations. We also offer those hip, gable, and then both of those are also offered in a band shell configuration, meaning you can leave an end open as an option. It's not engineered that way, but actually, I'm traveling this week and just had a conversation with a customer a minute ago about literally setting up half of a 40 wide hip end as a band shell configuration. But that's the luxury that this system offers, is the ability to change so easily on those configurations.
100%. And it gives you options to do all kind of different types of tents too. Like, you can get it out of the old ordinary A-frame style tent and do a half a tent with Keder and still come out with a product that looks nice, fit, and finished.
When you're saying half of a tent, Davis, why don't you further explain half which way?
Yeah, to if you're looking at the tent in width-wise and you were to cut it straight down the center, that's what I'm talking about with splitting the tent. So to put it in perspective to where you can visualize this, it would be like taking your 40 wide, cutting it directly in half, and then putting that flat end up against a building, and per se, now you have an awning structure up. And with the ability to have Keder, you now have tops that you can slide into that track and get tight enough to where it's going to structurally be sound and shed rain very well.
Yeah, we call that a monoslope. We've built quite a few of them. It's really a good option for people. Let's say you've got an outside dining space at a restaurant. historically, people would take a regular tent, put it on the patio. Well, half the water is going back to the building. So this gives you an opportunity to stand that tent with a high side against the building. Water comes down on that top. Everything gets shed to the outside. Nothing goes back to the building. And there's all sorts of ways. Again, talking about Keder, we've done gutters with Keder, right? So there's no way that you can overwhelm a rain gutter on a tent, which has historically happened with a conventional tent rain gutter with clips. What happens when that thing gets full of water? That water's going to find a way out. With Keder, it's harder for it to do because it's theoretically sealed from one end to the other because that Keder is sliding into a confined track for the entire length.
Well, and another cool thing just to add to it, when you're talking about a Keder tent, is your ability to blend the different types of tops. So the bride wants one clear panel. It's a heck of a lot easier to do that with a Keder tent. You know what? Yeah, we can make this panel clear and the rest will be white. Or you're not doing that with a rope and roll tent or a 20 by 20 frame tent.
Yeah, that's a great point to point out. And we can even segue into this custom wise with like a Keder system. You're not fit to direct dimensions. Like for example, we had a tent not long ago, Bryan, that you and I both know about. And our confined space that we had, it was in a courtyard. And it was 29 by 29. And we built a tent that was 28 by 28. And because of the whole Keder track system, like Keith was talking about earlier, there's no good way to put that frame up. You have to put it up on legs and build it on legs first. And not to mention this tent also, Keith, that you'll love this. It was over about a 20-foot tree. So the frame had to be built on very long legs, very tall legs. And then once we got it up, we simply were able to just pull those tops straight into the frame up and over without having to get on ladders, etc., other than to start feeding it into the Keder. If this wasn't a Keder style tent, you're talking about climbing all over a frame that you're now 22 feet in the air to get that top up and over that tent. And that's just not, one, it's not safe. And two, that's going to take you forever to do.
Yeah, that's right. You're just so versatile when you're using Keder.
Yeah.
Keder system.
So in talking about custom stuff, we'll just keep on this topic for a second. Keith, y'all can make colored Keder, can't you?
Yeah, yep, absolutely. So there are a couple things with Keder. We can make it whatever you want it to be. Now, predominantly, most common would be white, gray, and black. That would be the most common. But yeah, we have people that have wanted it to be identical to the tent top that they have. So it's a certain red, for example. They supplied me with the fabric, and we can make it match seamless at that point, right?
Yep.
The exact dye lot of the tent top itself. So yes, it's again because we make it all in house. It's so customizable for us that yes, we can match it to whatever someone wants it to be.
And why that can be important is in terms of people trying to figure out why that would even matter. If I were to make a red top, right, and then we bond our white Keder to it, you're going to have a white Keder strip on either side of that rectangular red mid that you have that's put into the frame now, and that white Keder can stick out. So now, with the customization of being able to match that color to that top, now that Keder disappears, and now it's a true red mid.
That's also getting more and more, people are being more and more sensitive about that stuff now with the advent of these the black tents that are all the rage. We've ordered more black Keder in the past, I don't know, year or so than we've ever, in my time, have ever ordered.
Yeah, it's a hot thing right now.
So when we talk about customizing these tents too, I will say for those of you listening that are curious about customization, we have this conversation, seems like routinely also, is that it's easier to customize a gable-ended tent than the hip-ended tent. A hip-ended tent's just got more dimensions. One dimension is going to affect another in a hip-ended tent more so than a gable. So we like to, if we're going to customize a tent, if we have an option to do that, we would prefer to customize a gable-ended tent versus a hip every time. We can make those gable-ended customized tents literally to the inch. To Davis's point a minute ago, that space was 29 by 29. We made it 28 by 28. But if it needed to be 28.2 outside dimension, let's say, whatever it needed to be, then with our with our inside design team, we can make that happen.
Yeah, Keder just supplies so many more options than you would have on a West Coast style frame from start to finish, from the install standpoint, from the engineering of the tent, from the look of it, from the longevity of it. It's all around a better product, and it is just the new version of the old ways.
So Keder is always a better option. When somebody's, we have cases where our customers are sitting down with the bride, and then their primary product is going to be a Keder tent to offer them, but Joe Blow down the street has a conventional West Coast frame. What are some of the things that they would tell their clients and prospective clients why the Keder tent is a better option for them? They may be priced a little higher.
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind for me is when we talk about water getting into a tent. So, sometimes, by the way, when it's a small frame tent, okay, maybe there's no lace line. But when you're talking about a rope and pole tent or a West Coast frame where it's lace and grommet that has to bring the panels together, it's an additional leak point as opposed to Keder being watertight and not allowing water to get in. I also think it's stronger. Naturally, the frames are commonly stronger. When you're talking about a 2-inch tube West Coast frame compared to a box beam, naturally it's engineered differently. So I think I would speak probably to it being more watertight heater tents, and then just for safety reasons, it's a different engineering done on heater tents.
So they should probably be selling that peace of mind that comes with a tent that's going to be naturally stronger. It's going to be able to take it should be able to take a lot worse weather to hit it. And then what I always
like stripping water in their tent. I can promise you that.
No doubt about it. And then also talk about bells and whistles. Davis, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the options, sidewall options, those kind of things that come with these tents that we can do that you wouldn't get on a let's call it a lesser tent.
Right. So, I mean, with the added structure that a Keder product brings to the table, you now have the ability for anchor points on that tent to hang different decorations with lighting to sound, etc. There's just so much, there's way more points of contact that actually allows you to give a strong bond on something that's hanging, dead loads, etc. Also, when it comes to sidewalls, like you mentioned, with Kedered sidewalls on a Kedered frame tent, you now have the ability, like our Future Track, you can have Keder sliding walls that have a center zipper. Say you want to let some fresh air into the tent if you have the wall, or if you have the tent completely enclosed. You can unzip that, push it back to the legs, attach it to the legs, and now you have, it looks good too. Now you have another access point in and out of the tent that you can do at any bay. You talk about also with walls, the versatility of Keder, even not on a tent, for example. We've done many projects on people's back patios, back decks, where we take a Keder strip, the length of however long it needs to be for the wall, and you can attach those Keder strips to the house, and now you have a slot where you can slide these walls, panels in, and you can enclose a back patio for the winter. There's just so many different types of ways to use this product, and there's so many different types of ways that you can dress it up.
I like that there's so many extrusions available to us too. So many extrusions available to us to be able to use and implement this based on application. And like Davis is talking about attaching things to a porch, we've done it before where we had a Keder strip that needed, just based on where the Keder had to attach, we needed a Keder that needed to open, let's say 90 degrees to the profile from where it would be otherwise. So those extrusions are available to us out there to totally customize it. And then we get those Keder strips powder coated the same color as the trim on the house. Next thing you know, that's a durable item that stays with that application long term. And then time after time, our customer just comes in and reinstalls those, let's say, sidewalls in the exact same place every time.
That's right.
So, Davis, let's talk real quick, too, about as far as Keder frames go. We were talking about our Future Track, Future Light. I do want to point out that not all Keder frames are created equally also, because just because the tent offers Keder doesn't mean that for your operation, it will provide necessarily the same ROI, depending on, certainly on the cost outlay. not all Kedered frames even go together the same way.
Right. Like in terms of our future track, and I know we touched on this earlier, from an install standpoint, you can install the tops whether it's on legs or not. Obviously, you would want to install it while the tent's on the ground, just because it's easier. If say the top does get a snag or something when you're trying to pull it up and over, you can get to that snag without having to get up on a ladder. But it is so much more versatile in terms of install that it just provides a better opportunity to make more money, to do it quicker, to get it down to a science to where your guys get out of the truck and they're not even talking to each other.
So the other thing that I'd like to mention, if I could, you referenced earlier about sidewalls, right? You think in the West Coast frame sidewalls where they're just clipped to an interior rope. And on those windy days, you're trying to figure out ways to secure the bottom of the sidewall so it's not blowing all over the place. You don't have to worry about that with Kedered sidewall, right? Because it's framed in at each leg. I remember way back in my young tenting days, trying to put stakes in the bottom of the sidewall or run a cable through the bottom of the sidewall. It was comical because you couldn't stop it. When it's Kedered, you are secured in.
That's right.
Yeah, that's one thing that I always tell our customers too is that all of our Kedered walls come standard with a rod pocket at the bottom. It's your choice of whether or not you decide to use that. Then the other question has come about is how do you anchor those at the legs? I contend that you don't necessarily need to do that so much, because if you need to get in and out of that wall, it's nice to be able to just pull. Let's say you put a rod in the bottom, just to pull that rod out, then you can open and close it. If that wall, we do offer a system to attach those rods and cinch those to the bottoms of the legs. But my point is the Keder's captive at the legs anyway. So really all the rod's there to do is to keep that wall from even bellowing at all in the middle. And that rod pocket offers you the ability to do that.
I agree with you, Bryan.
So the consensus is that when in doubt, Keder it on out.
I would tend to agree with it.
Love
it. My life,
Love it. There's your new slogan, Keith. So we're pushing on 45 minutes, guys. Y'all have anything else y'all want to add before we start to close this thing?
I think you guys have covered an amazing amount of things here. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, I would like to say that, Keder, we still talk about Keder like it's a new technology, but it's been around for what, Keith, 30 plus years or more.
Yeah, I don't know the full history, right? But yeah, from what I understand or what I've read, it originated in Europe and back all the way to the 70s is when it's believed that it was used on sails and masts is really what it started as. What's unique is that the Europeans have been using it much longer than the Americans. And so it really didn't come into the U.S. till, I'm going to guess, the 90s, something like that, early 90s. So it is. And yet, that's a long time ago, right? So it is funny that there still are plenty of people out there that don't know what Keder is.
I see it all the time. I'm on a trip right now, and the amount of people who haven't invested in, I almost take it personal because there's so many people who haven't invested in Keder that I would love to just, I'm still working on them, as we all are, to try to convince them that there's a better way than than the way they're currently doing things. And thankfully, we have a lot of our customers that they tell that same story for us a lot of times because they've seen the reality of what it's done to their business and what it's done to decrease their labor. Everybody's so labor sensitive these days, and to see how much it's decreased labor across the board. We're still talking about a technology that's as old as it is, like it's brand new, because there's so many people that still need to come to the table.
Well, and a lot of times it's like anything else in life. Things that are new to people are intimidating, right? And so that guy that just has never touched a Kedered tent to really see the event. That's why I think, when you guys do the tent schools at Top Tech and people get to trade shows, if they get their hands on it and really understand it, the intimidation factor is gone and it becomes a no-brainer to them. They just need to get their hands on it and see it in action.
I just got through with a lunch with a guy that's a customer of ours, and we were talking about another gentleman that we both knew that does not currently have. He's got a different Kedered system, and then saw ours through this particular customer. And he said his eyes were open, that he didn't realize that there was another way to do it versus how they had been doing it. And it was because, back to the point that not all Keder products are the same. This particular guy was blown away by how versatile our Future Track system was and how it went together. And they were specifically taking it down, but he could see the modularity of the system and how user friendly it is. He could see the value for his operation, no doubt.
Yep.
So yeah, I guess that pretty much wraps up Keder in a pretty good nutshell, doesn't it, Bolt?
Yeah, I think we covered what we could right now. Certainly, if anybody's got any specific questions, reach out to Davis or I or inside sales to that staff. They're capable. Can't thank Keith enough for being with us, taking time from all that he's got going on to spend an hour with us talking about the thing it's been, Keder's been good to a lot of us. We saw a lot of that tent over the past 30 plus years, whatever it's been. So can't thank you enough, Keith.
Hey, thank you for having me. Most people don't get excited about talking about Keder. Keith loves talking about Keder.
You know what? I will say this. You're the only guy that we've had on so far and probably will have on that has a bobblehead.
I was about to say the same thing.
Fair enough.
Keith, I need one for my office.
What you guys are doing is awesome. Your podcasts are fun, educational. Thank you for what you guys are doing for the industry. I mean that.
Sure thing.
All in your help, Keith.
Yep.
But like Bryan said, I want to thank Keith. Guys, you'll see Keith out at Matra, all the good shows and stuff. Don't be afraid to go up and talk to him. He's an awesome dude, and he's pretty good fun at night. He can take you out on some good times. He's a good guy to drink a beer with.
Thank you, guys.
Well, guys, I want to close this on up. Appreciate you listening today. Don't forget, like and subscribe to our podcast. It only helps us grow. We see you guys listening. We appreciate it. Check out our socials. We're doing big things there, too. But until next time, later, taters.